And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most urgent topics in the never dull world of Indiana basketball. This is our 121st edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 513th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, May 9th, 2019. I'm your host, Andy Bottoms. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call as we begin every moment of the Assembly Call, or every edition, rather. And that's with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And for me, it's a little bit hard to come by these a lot of times as we're going through the off season. And so pickings were slim this week, but I will say I'll kind of hit on something that we're going to touch on during the show as well. And that was the APR, the academic progress report results came out this week. And IU's, while it did not improve dramatically over the 4-year average that's used, really only going up a point there, it did improve pretty dramatically from year to year. And basically in what I would consider to be Archie Miller's first real year, although he gets partial credit for the 2016-17 season. But it was updated now to include the 2017-18 season, and IU's numbers jumped from 920 to 980. So good progress. We talk a lot about on-court progress and what we've seen, and handing out report cards as we've done the last couple of weeks about what we've seen on the floor, on the recruiting trail, and all those kinds of things. But I think most IU fans would look at and have had great pride in the past in how IU's handled things academically, and all the off the court things that are equally important to turn in these guys that come in into young men that leave the program and leave it in good standing. So I think that's a positive sign, another positive for Archie as he goes through early in his campaign here at IU. And time will tell as the 4-year average gets updated and things move forward. But I do think it's reflective of a continued emphasis on academics, a continued emphasis on getting the right kids in who are going to take that part of their responsibility seriously. And I think that's an overall positive sign, which is a little bit dated when the lag on these is about a year. But again, I think it shows he was able to come in and really instill that focus and have some good things there. So I think that's something that everybody can be proud of. And as we certainly look to be more and more proud of what we see on the court, this is a good sign that things off the court are going well at the same time. And so that for me will be this week's banner moment. So with that, we will join the rest of our esteemed co-host. I'll introduce those guys. And to my left, he is a longtime high school basketball coach in Indiana and the founder of the Delphi Bracketology Club, and also the host of Sports Talk with Tonsoni. It's the coach, Brian Tonsoni, which means it's Tonsoni time. And Coach, what's on your mind tonight?
Well, hello, everyone. What's on my mind is how to judge the program when you see things like recent recruits going to other schools and IU losing out on recruits. Obviously, the results of the season were not what most fans want. How do you look at the program? And I try to remind myself to look at it in a certain way. And fans are always open to pick the parts that they think are most important. But for me, it is, to piggyback a little bit on what you said in the banner moment, it is overall progress of the program. When Archie Miller came in, he said he was going to have an inside-out recruiting plan. That is being carried out. 2 straight Mr. Basketballs. Try to remember that as these recent recruits have gone elsewhere. Several guys from the state of Indiana. That is what the fan base really clamored for, and we're getting that. The fan base also says Indiana does basketball correct, and that is behavior, that is in the class, all of those things that we have longed for. And short of it's just a small rules violation by one of the players. In the 2 years that Archie has had the team, I think they've represented the university well. The results on the floor, 16, 19 have improved slightly, but not near enough. The recruiting, I would urge fans to still be patient. When you come in late with a couple kids and they go to bigger schools, the Morton thing that went down earlier is a little bit of a sting, obviously. Not going to sugarcoat that, but there are other players that are on the list. So my take is, Brian, slow down a little bit. Look at the big picture. The defense is getting better. The recruiting's good. We're getting guys in that want to be in the Indiana program, and be a little patient looking forward. That doesn't excuse the program from not taking steps forward and forward as fast as possible in the future.
And to my right, he's the senior writer at The Big Lead, a proud Indiana Journalism School graduate, and your go-to Twitter account if you enjoy all caps live tweeting of San Diego Padres baseball games. And to add what Jared had in this introduction here, I was talking to my wife a little bit before the show and talking about, we don't have a ton of big topics, big news this week. Probably a lot of questions that we'll hit. And then she suggested I just open the floor for Ryan to talk about the Padres for a little while, and that would fill up the time nicely.
Totally there for you, man. They're competing this year. It's the first time in a long time. I'm all there. First time in a decade. Let's get this. Friar Power. It's also Tony Gwynn's birthday today. So, Mr. Padre, wherever you are, happy birthday, my friend. I kind of wanted to touch on just the Morton recruitment. This is really, I think, the first guy that Archie's gone all in on that he didn't get. You could tell Archie wanted Ethan Morton really badly. And I think that the results of this past season really hurt IU in this pursuit, and possibly the fact that there's other guys on the roster who maybe, play the same spot, do the same things as Morton. But he's a guy that Archie really wanted, and he's a legit top 50 player. And to lose him to Purdue, this is the first recruit they've lost to Purdue that you really, in a while, that you really say, oh man, I wish we, that IU went in on, that IU went all in on. And so it's a guy that is a miss, and it's a bummer. And then when you look at Lester Quinones, who just visited, most people expect him to go to Memphis and pick Memphis tomorrow. And missing out on those two guys really does sting. I know Morton is a 2020 recruit, so there's a long way to go until we know how that recruiting class is going to shape up. And from all accounts, it's going to be another good one for Indiana. But filling out the rest of this 2019 class has been a last minute scramble. And honestly, if Quinones doesn't commit, where do you go? And I guess, I don't have the answer to that. And I don't think a lot of people do. And it might be that you enter the season with, 2 open scholarship spots, maybe something that you didn't expect happening. Maybe you bring in a grad transfer. So, but I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do, but those two things, that's really all that happened this week that was notable to me. The APR stuff, obviously great. And Trace Jackson Davis getting named Mr. Basketball since the last time I got in, since the last time I was on the show. So that's, again, 2 straight Mr. Basketballs. They're recruiting well. It's just, you kind of feel like they went all in on a couple guys and didn't get them. And I think coming in late with Quinones has a lot to do with why they missed on this. But at the same time, you really want to see the program looking like it can go pick and choose who it wants when it wants them. And that's going to come with success on the court as well. This program has everything off the court you want. You want to start having that success on the court. So it makes things like recruiting easier. And then with that, it just starts to perpetuate because you have the talent and you have everything else in place.
All right. Well, here's what we're going to talk about this week. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the recruiting. You guys alluded to a couple things. So we'll talk about that and maybe what comes next for IU in light of the, in one case, a recent decision, in one case, an anticipated decision. So we'll talk through that. We'll touch on the APR stuff a little bit more, just to get a little bit more inside the numbers with that. And then the other big update of the week was some news about IU's non-conference schedule. So we'll look at that, who the potential opponent might be or opponents might be, and then kind of step back and look at what we know now about what the non-conference schedule looks like heading into next season. And then we'll answer your questions. We got a lot of those. And as I said, we may be heavy on those, but there's a lot of good questions to get to. So we'll hit all that coming up this week on Assembly Call Radio. So from a recruiting standpoint, both Coach and Ryan alluded to this. Ethan Morton announced just before we came on that he would be going to Purdue. That was pretty widely speculated in recent days that was going to be the case. That was a guy who IU had gone in on quite a bit. There's no truth to the rumor. That's why Jared is not on the show. He has outspoken about his love of Ethan Morton and all the things he heard about him and his communication on defense. No truth to the rumor that is why Jared is not here, that he made some kind of last-ditch effort to go and get Ethan Morton to commit to IU. Ryan is trying to add something clever, but he's muted himself. So
we're not saying that's not why he's here. It's definitely not why he's here, though.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So we have that. And then, as Ryan mentioned, we're recording this on Thursday night. Friday, Lester Quinones is announcing his decision. I think the last I saw, the crystal ball is 100% Memphis. There have been some questions raised about the number of scholarships they're giving out and how many they have and all those kinds of things, but I'm not sure in this case, if they get a chance to get him, that it certainly feels like a we'll accept your commitment and figure it out later type of thing. So I guess with that, we had a question come in from Tyler, and he basically said, guess we're probably done with 2019 recruits. With that being said, do we start the season with 2, 1, or no open scholarships? So I had kind of written down if there are any other additions on the grad transfer market potentially. Somebody also, Matt, also asked if IU was looking at former Iowa guard Isaiah Moss. I know there's some weird things about intra-conference transfers with the Big Ten, and I haven't really heard IU mentioned with him, although I haven't not heard them mentioned with him, I suppose.
Is he a grad transfer or regular transfer?
He's a grad transfer as best I
grad transfers there aren't restrictions on, so he can
okay.
Max Bielfeldt was an interconference grad transfer.
I know they can kind of waive some of that, but I know some teams in the past have been a little bit weird about it. Although anytime anybody's weird about that, they end up relenting after the onslaught of people calling them jerks and vindictive usually gets people to sway the other way. But Coach, as you step back and kind of look now, do you see any potential additions to the roster, or are we at this point feeling like the guys that are out there now, it's pretty much set in? I think you're muted as well. It's an epidemic tonight on.
Yeah. So can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Sorry about that. I think they're going to add someone that we're not aware of, simply because there are 11 scholarships. And you had a couple players who sat out the last year who were injured, and you don't know what their progress is going to be, how soon they'll make it back. And Deron Davis also deals with injuries. And so, you have some players that are going to be in their sophomore year in Demezi that may make progress. So I would really be surprised if there was not something added if Quinones says Memphis. Just to have some depth in case things, may not work out. And as we saw last year, when those things happen that you don't expect and you lose some numbers, it throws a wrench into your practice and your development. So I think maybe I would lean towards a graduate transfer. So you have that scholarship open again for the 2020 season when you have right now 7 left out of the top 8 that we talked about last week. So I think they'll add someone. I don't know that they'll add 2, but I do think they'll add at least 1.
Ryan?
Yeah, I think they'll add somebody, but I don't know from where, who to target. Trendon Wofford's still out there, but it doesn't seem like he's interested in IU as much as IU is interested in him. I don't think there is a fit out there. Just looking nationally at the recruiting landscape, especially given a guy like Boogie Ellis decommitted from Duke, but he's pretty much probably going to go to Memphis now. There isn't somebody out there you're looking at thinking, okay, that guy could fit. He could fit in. This would be a great position for him.
Did we know about Fitzner way in advance? Or was that somewhat of a surprise?
That was pretty quick. Yeah, no, I think that was pretty quick. Look, there could be a grad transfer out there. If there's not somebody we're hearing about that is all of a sudden going to pop up on the radar. So there's certainly a long way to go as far as that. They don't have to be on campus until, the end of the summer. So there's plenty of time with that. There could also be grad transfers who decide to opt out and transfer later in the summer. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen. But I would say that, yeah, there's nobody we're earmarking right now that could fill that role. I do think they will add another player, whoever that is. For the practice body alone, it's important. And, even if it's a sit out transfer, I don't know, but I think somebody is going to get added to that mix. But I couldn't tell you who.
There's so many people on the transfer market too. We've talked about a few that have popped up, and you see some taking visits and committing. I think that's the route that might happen. That, like a Fitzner last year, all of a sudden a week or two, and we have an addition to the roster.
Yeah, I just looked up. He committed on May 3rd, so really only about a week ago at this time last year. And that progressed pretty quickly from his name really coming onto the radar to something happening there. So,
sometimes these guys visit and you don't even know until they're on campus. The Joey Brunk thing happened incredibly fast as well. I think that, we don't know what's going to happen, but I would be surprised. I could see them leaving one scholarship spot open and not having an issue But 2 is a lot to carry into a season, especially just, because you've lost some veteran walk-ons too, who know how to practice, know the system, all that stuff. You're going to be replacing them. So it's just, again, I think it's, you need to be able to have those bodies at your disposal.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if both those are still open. Or if both those are used. I would be surprised if both are open, but I would be shocked if they end up using both, because it feels pretty late to be filling both those up. And I don't think Archie, even by his own admission, has been a guy who feels the need to just fill out the number because you've got that many to give. So we'll kind of see what happens with that. The other thing that comes along with that is you kind of look at the Morton one and spin that forward a little bit. The question really becomes, with him now out of the mix, which recruitment really starts to take on extra importance. It feels like Trey Galloway is the kind of obvious answer to that question, both from a general size standpoint, from some of the competitiveness things that you hear about those guys. But is that the way you would go with that, coach, or do you think there's somebody else who really might be able to fit that mold or do some of the same things that IU was looking for him to come in and do?
Yeah, you need talent, and you need the best talent. So you need to go after whoever is the best recruit that has been offered. And Garcia, a 5-star center, might fit that mold. That might become the priority. And I'm just an old-fashioned dude. I like Indiana guys. So Galloway, to me, a hustle guy, a dive-on-the-floor guy, limited shot right now. But that seems like a guy, if you can get him and keep him from a Notre Dame or a Purdue, that's the kind of kid that fits an Archie Miller mode a little bit. And then, Leo from Bloomington South, we need shooters, and he might be a development piece that might not really blossom until sophomore or junior year. But if these kids are Indiana kids and they're 3 stars, top 150, 100 to 150, I don't see where that's a real problem. Yeah, we'd like to have the Mortons of the world and some of those guys. And there's some other non-Indiana young men that we've offered. Love to have any of those. I think Jared and I talked about that last week. For me, it's Galloway and Leal. Let's get them in. If there are 4 scholarships open, that leaves 2 for out-of-state guys.
Yeah, I think, sometimes you do have to go with the local guy. I think, there's just a commitment from those guys to get better. And there's a commitment from those guys to, do right by Indiana. And so I'm not saying that doesn't exist from guys outside, but I think that Anthony Leal is a guy who's going to do whatever it takes to be good at Indiana. And so I think that with a guy like Morton gone, you do need to find a shooter. And I think that Leal is a guy who maybe doesn't have the quickest feet in the world, maybe isn't the best defender in the world, but you can work on him and make him better. And I think that he's a guy that they're going to probably wind up, I say have to take. Indiana never has to take anybody, but that's just kind of how it feels. Is like, go take that guy. That guy wants to be at Indiana. He's been waiting for his Indiana offer. He finally got it. I think that that's a guy that they should bring in, especially if you've got extra rides open. You can afford to spend one on a guy who maybe isn't going to make a huge impact. That's a guy who in his senior year is going to be knocking down threes against you when you play Butler or Purdue or Notre Dame or whoever, if you don't get him. So I think that, I know that's a very specific one game thing, but it's the kind of guy who can do that kind of stuff for you in the end. And so I think that Leal's recruitment's going to take off. I think Galloway is another guy whose recruitment is probably going to be accelerated at this point. But again, a lot of these things won't be hashed out until early fall, maybe late summer, as these guys take their visits and get to know the coaches better. But I think that both those guys are really become far more important with Ethan Morton picking Purdue. And again, if you go into next year with 4 or 5 scholarships now, including the guys who are going to leave, and you have a lot of open scholarships, you can afford to take it on guys who maybe don't have the highest ceilings in the world, but are winning players.
You just got to find more guys. And I'm really high on Armand Franklin. I just think he wants to be at Indiana.
He's a fighter too, man.
Yeah,
that kid is a street brawler. I love it.
And his mom's cool too. So, added bonus. But I may be wrong, because you need talent. You can't just win with 3 stars from Indiana that love being in Assembly Hall. I get that, but it does mean that you have a better chance. And I think there's just great examples in the college game of pieces fitting together making a team and making a run in the NCAA tournament. So that's my hope.
Yep, I would agree. So it'll be interesting to watch how this plays out in light of recent events, and we'll keep you up to date with all that as we move forward. So coming up next on the assembly call, we're going to touch on the APR stuff a little bit more. I had a couple questions that I saw in the chat and wanted to get into that just a bit more. And then we'll look at the non-conference schedule news and where that sits at this point in the offseason, and we'll hit that next. So stick with us here on the assembly call. All right. Welcome, everybody.
They got to get Trendon in for a visit, man.
I know. I mean, you're kind of running out of time on some of that stuff. I mean, the only other thing.
Well, I mean, they've been trying. Well,
no. I get that part, but it's like, some of these guys are going to have to figure out some place to go. But you've also got, as people are like classes are finishing up, maybe some guys become eligible to grad transfer and they're waiting to make sure they graduate and everything works out well in that regard. So, I
mean, Trendon committed to, or isn't committed, but he's like over the last month, he's been leaning hard to LSU. Will Wade ain't going to be there much longer.
How dare you say that?
I mean, let's be real. So yeah, I don't understand that.
Yeah.
Anybody who's into him. I do like how on the crystal ball thing, like everybody this week changed their pick to Purdue for Ethan Morton when it leaked out that he was already going to do it. It's like, oh, see, I was right. But Anthony Leal, I just, for the audience there, Anthony Leal, it appears he's going to, I mean, if Indiana gave him a committable offer and said, because sometimes you offer guys and then it's like, okay, well, think about it for a while and get back to us in like 6 weeks or something like that. And we'll let you know how our class is shaping up and all that. I mean,
how's that work? Is it optional, a conditional commit offer?
Pretty much. I mean, like an offer.
Say, hey, you're second. We're waiting for this guy. If he says no,
they don't necessarily say that, but it's understood. I mean, Anthony Leal sees the rankings. He knows where he is, and if IU decides, hey, they always phrase it better. They're always like, we're looking at like our depth chart and how it's going to fit. Like an offer is not like binding or anything, it's like they offer them and make a big deal of offering them because, they want them to feel wanted. But it's not binding. If you commit to an offer, they can turn around and say, well, yeah, we just pulled your offer. Like, I mean, it's, and
the optics are bad, but you can do
right. But it's absolutely, it's nothing is set until the kid commits and signs on the dotted line. So none of this actually means anything until the kid signs his paper. He could be committed to a school for 2 years and then in 30 seconds change his mind and sign a paper for somebody else. So really it's all just for publicity and a dance. But Anthony Leal, I've been kind of told that he's really looking at IU and I think that when he gets the green light from Archie and company, they're evaluating him currently still, to see how he does this summer heading into his senior year. And if they're pleased with that, and what they see, then I think that he'll commit. And, but they are looking at other guys too. It's not like they're just saying Anthony Leal or nobody. So, it'll probably get to a point, and some schools do this where it gets to a point and they tell two guys, hey, we like you both. We want to take you, but we want to take one of you. It's basically who commits first. And if somebody hesitates, then they take the other guy. So, there's a lot of moving parts.
Do you think that happened with Newman and Franklin?
It may be. Yeah. I mean, I always felt like Franklin was headed to IU. He just seemed like more of Archie's type of guy. And that's not that they didn't want a guy like Newman, but I think that there was just a better fit there. And yeah, I think that, but I think again, if Newman commits first in that situation, you're not taking both of them probably. Right. I mean, and
also as the other player in that scenario, I'm not sure that you would want to go,
No.
And
like once the one commits and they accept it, you're kind of like,
that's
I don't know what the playing time situation looks like,
Yeah. I mean, it's
gonna be you or the other guy. I mean, there's a part of you that wants to say, hey, I'm going to go compete with this guy, but
of course. And that's more likely to happen in football where like if a top receiver goes somewhere and another top receiver goes somewhere, well, you can get those guys on the field at the same time, or two top offensive linemen. In basketball, really, you do see guys get their spots eliminated at schools. That's why I think that guys really push to have themselves labeled as like combo guards, because then it's like, well, I can play the two, and guys are playing more like that. So they fit in on both spots, the one and the two. Forwards are trying to be more like, post guys, but they can move out on the floor and shoot now. Because it's harder to, back in the old days, it was like you had your top 5 point guards in the nation, you had your top 5, forwards in the nation, you had your top 5 centers in the nation, and like none of them ever went to the same place. They all, got, like once the number one center was off the board, you moved to number two, you moved to number three, you moved to number four and tried to recruit him. So it's just a different world than it was years ago. But I think that it's a situation where Indiana may have him down with another guy and basically just say, okay, we want one of you, and whoever commits first. And if that was his right, I think Leo would commit first. I think he'd commit on the spot. But we'll see. There's a long way to go. We don't know what's going to happen. I'm going to fill up my water, but you guys can start the next segment if you want.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk a little bit of APR, but I think we can focus mostly on the schedule stuff, and we can maybe put a bracketology slant on it to some extent.
Play some 200 schools. And
yeah. Please do not play. Yeah. please do not play teams from the SWAC. All right. Actually start the timer on time this time. That would be a wise move. And welcome back to the Assembly Call. You can find all of our content at our website, assemblycall.com. And if you ever want to participate in our unedited live broadcasts or watch those replays, then check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. I'm Andy Bottoms, filling in for Jared Morris, here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni and Ryan Phillips. And we wanted to just hit a little bit more on the APR news that came out, just to give a little bit of background. And I will, in the interest of full disclosure, say that there are still components of this that even the three of us are not totally sure how they work. But as you look through this, so basically what happened this week, scores were reported for the 2017-18 season. There's a 4-year average that goes out, and that only went up from 943 to 944, which still ranks next to last in the Big Ten, I think just above Ohio State. But for the 2017-18 season, as I mentioned before, that was a 980 out of 1,000. And the Hoosier Sports Report had a really good write-up on this, so I won't read this verbatim, but did think it put some of these numbers into pretty good context. Basically said, former IU basketball coach Tom Crean, responsible for 2 years of the latest calculation, during which Indiana's multi-year score fell from 3 straight years of perfect 1,000 scores to 985 in 2014-15. This is the average now, 964 in 2015-16, and it fell further to 943 during the 2016-17 year, which was academically shared by Crean and Miller. That's kind of what I said before. That seems a little bit odd to me that, Archie, while he started midway through that semester, feels a little bit odd to have that be a shared year, but it is what it is. And basically this says excessive roster turnover, players leaving, and poor academic standing can negatively affect the APR scores. And so, I do think the single year jump is pretty good. I think, Coach, I believe you put a couple of numbers in the chat of what the single year ones were in Crean's last couple of years. So I'll let you hit on that. But I think, you don't see a drop, even though it's a 4-year average. The sample size of that's pretty small. You don't see that drop from being 1,000 for a few years all the way down to 940 without having a couple really rough years mixed in succession to really drag that number down.
Yeah, and we were talking about what happens when players leave to go to pursue pro careers. If Indiana had perfect 1,000-point scores in 12, 13, and 14, then turning pro must not count against the program if they are academically eligible. Transfers, I believe, do. So what you've seen when in the last 2 years of Tom Crean's era was a lot of guys leaving the program, maybe some guys who did leave pro that didn't finish that second semester in an academically eligible situation. And so we've talked about how the APR kind of kept Archie Miller at bay from roster movement early in his career. In order to avoid penalties, a 4-year average has to be over 930. And with years of 918, 920, when Archie Miller was hired, there was a big need to get to a 980 or above, because now, short of, something just, crazy happening, there's no way that any sanctions would happen to Indiana. Their 4-year average, next year would have to be below 900 APR score, I think, to have that fall below 930. So that was really important. And we lose sight of that when there was only 16 wins and no tournament. But Archie could not come in and say, hey, guys, you're not kind of my players. You probably need to go play somewhere else. And maybe even going into this year to protect that APR as much as possible. And the 980 was figured out when I'm going to forget his name now. The young man left in December after the first semester in Archie's first year. Went to Oklahoma State.
Curtis Jones.
And so, he wasn't there second semester, so the points available were 50. There was one player who was academically eligible but left early, so there's 49 out of 50, therefore equals 98%, and then 980 is the score. So that Curtis Jones was the only knock on the APR in that first year. So it's important. It's important to get players in to make sure they're making progress towards graduation. They are graduating. And if they're going to leave to take a pro career, that they are academically eligible. And I think Archie's doing that in a fashion that is the way IU would like it.
Yep. Ryan, any kind of closing thoughts before we shut down the APR discussion?
I'll be honest. I'm a sports writer, sports journalist, cover a lot of college sports. I know nothing about the APR. I just know like what a good number is and what a bad number is. And IU is on the good side of it. So thumbs up, positive. I know
this is normally the part in the show, in a post-game show, where we hit numbers, which Ryan is equally disinterested in.
Yeah, I just
so
don't care.
This works out pretty well.
But they're in a good spot, and it looks like it's improving, and that's really what you need, and you need to be in a good spot with it, especially given how much turnover there was under the last administration. There is a lot of turnover this year, so we'll see how that plays out on the APR, and how the guys do academically and all that stuff. But yeah, it's weird because they're gonna have to refigure this in college basketball with so many guys transferring, with so many guys jumping early and all that stuff. They're going to have to refigure the way they do the numbers, because I don't think you can really punish teams for all the transfers when the NCAA has made transferring so much easier. So I think that, and it's become so much more common. So I think they're going to have to refigure that. But as it stands, IU's in a good spot right now.
One quick thing too, the low numbers of APR under Tom Crean came in when the recruiting classes, after Yogi came in and Zeller and Oladipo and those guys, some of the struggles, and you saw on court, a lot of players left and a lot of turnover, which led to lower APR. So I think that was indicative of then why Indiana maybe was looking to go a different direction in its basketball program. And so again, another reason maybe to be a little patient with Archie, as he was tasked with rebuilding that side as well as the basketball side.
Yep, that's a good way to end that topic on. So schedule news, wanted to hit this. This was one of the other news items that came out this week. So it was announced that IU is going to be playing in the Jimmy V Classic in New York. Typically that's been an early December event, and they will play one of, this is not a 4-team tournament scenario. So there's just 2 games back to back, but the winners don't play each other or anything like that. They'll play one of Louisville, Texas Tech, or UConn. So according to what I read on Inside the Hall in the past, the matchups for this have typically been announced in late May. So we may just be, a couple weeks away from hearing, who that is. But, as we look at this event, Ryan, I'll throw this to you first. Is there any one of these that really stands out that you want to see IU play? I looked a little bit through some of these, 2 early top 25s and things like that. Of those, Louisville seems to be rated the best. They've got a really good recruiting class and a decent core of guys coming back from this year. Texas Tech certainly loses a lot, but Chris Beard has been so good that I think you're hard pressed to really bet against him.
They lost a lot last year too.
So if we've learned nothing from the recent past, it would be that Texas Tech is probably going to be okay. And then UConn to me is a little bit harder to gauge. Had a first year coach last year with Dan Hurley, I believe, and so they are starting to maybe get more of his players in, but I would say a little bit harder to assume that they'll be a great team. So anybody preference wise for you to play, Ryan? Would you rather play somebody you think you can beat, or would you rather play a Texas Tech or a Louisville?
I want to play a team that's going to look good later in the season. I think that Louisville, we just played. I kind of want to stay away from a team. I'd like to see us play somebody different. Louisville, they just played 3 years in a row or 2 years in a row? I don't know, but I
think 3 actually.
3 years in a row. Yeah, I think 3. Yeah, played Louisville a couple years in a row. I mean, yeah, that's probably best for the strength of schedule, but also Texas Tech would be fun just to see something different. That game might end up being 30-29 or something like that, given both these coaches' proclivities. But I would love to see us play Texas Tech. I'd love to see him play UConn just to put a different team out there. But if you're looking at purely at strength of schedule, Louisville, of course. That said, I think that any of those teams will be good for IU strength of schedule. So I think it's great that they got put in this. Hey, Andy, I had a question real quick. Where are they going to be next November?
I believe that's Maui is where they'll be.
Right. I need to get reminded of that every
Good,
show.
good.
Thanks.
Coach, what are your thoughts on the potential opponents in the Jimmy V?
Well, I'm happy to see Indiana back in really big tournaments. Maui again coming up in the next season. The Jimmy V. Indiana basketball is a top program, or at least we want it to be, and think it is as Indiana supporters. It's nice to see Indiana playing again in these. It's what happened in the 90s and in the thousands, zeros, aughts, whatever you call it. And so I'm glad they're playing in it. You want to play someone that will help you come tournament time, and you have a chance to beat Louisville's probably the best of those three teams, at least on paper, in way too early polls. I guess if you want to win, I think right now UConn gives the best chance for Indiana to win just by looking at rosters and where they were last year. But I think regardless, it is an opponent that is going to boost the strength of schedule and boost the net and all that stuff that you and I deal with. And so I think it's a good situation to be in.
Yeah, none of those teams are going to hurt you. So it really doesn't matter who they play. In my opinion, Louisville might bump you a little bit more. But yeah, none of those teams are going to hurt you. It seems like a really good addition to the schedule.
Yeah, I would agree. I kind of echo what you said, Ryan. After having played Louisville at least 2 or 3 years in a row, feels like that'd be one to avoid. And I would guess that's probably the one to me that is least likely, just given that history. I think Texas Tech would be interesting. Maybe the earlier in the season you play them, the better off you might be. And I think that one, like you said, any of them I think are going to look good over the course of the year. But I think if we see Texas Tech on a similar trajectory as what they've shown the last couple of years, then that one might be one that if you're able to steal it early, it looks a little bit better on down the line. And I think from a UConn's perspective, the American is a little bit of a toss up from year to year. So you never really know, but it's certainly not one that's going to hurt you. But
it's always so weird for me that they're not still in the Big East. Like it really is weird. It's like Syracuse being in the ACC. It's like you think of the Big East when you think of Syracuse, and not anymore. It's sad.
Yeah, exactly. So wanted to just kind of reset what we know so far about the non-conference schedule. So just for context, last year IU played 11 non-conference games, and I think you could probably say they played 5 that really meant something or had a chance to move the needle, being Marquette, Arkansas, Duke, Louisville, and Butler. You're at least 4 this year that put you in there. So you've got this Jimmy V game. You've got Arkansas coming to Assembly Hall, although their new coach there, who really knows what that might look like. You play Notre Dame in the Crossroads, and then a Big Ten ACC game, which projects to be at home. The wild card is the potential 5th game at this point is whether IU takes part in the Gavitt Games again. I feel like I've seen some different things about this. I captured this from Inside the Hall, though. I used to played in 3 or 4. That's not really up for debate. The part that I'm less sure about is, kind of what the commitment has been and how many years they're going to play in it. And to piggyback a little bit off of what Ryan said earlier, I don't know whether it's probably unlikely or maybe the trip to Maui makes it less likely that IU would play in the Gavitt Games the following.
They're not going to travel next year. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably wouldn't travel. You'd have 3 games in Maui that you expect to be good. You're going to have a Big Ten ACC game at that point. So that gives you 4 games. Do you really, and you've got the Crossroads. Would you really have a kind of 6th potential good game that year? So yeah, I would tend to believe that IU will still play in the Gavitt Games this year, but that's kind of speculation at that point. And then I would assume they would fill out the rest of the non-conference schedule in a way similar or maybe slightly better than what they did a year ago. But, Coach, as you look down that list of opponents, whether it be from a bracketology perspective or from a fan's perspective, do you feel like that gives enough challenges in the non-conference, leaves you enough room for some hopefully sure wins, and gives you enough different styles and different things where you can get a pretty good idea of what your team looks like going into conference play?
Yeah, the first 4 games we know for sure, and I'm really looking at that Big Ten ACC matchup. I understand that Indiana is a blue blood program, and we want it to be there. But playing Duke several times and North Carolina several times, I'd really like to see a 4, 5, 6, 7 ranking team in the ACC come into Assembly Hall.
Feed us Wake Forest,
but from a bracketology standpoint of Virginia Tech with the new coach, Clemson. I do not want to see Syracuse because of the matchup early in the season playing against that zone. but I think there needs to be something different for us, both from a bracketology and a fan standpoint, that where our program is at, it would be nice to have, not that we don't have a chance against a Duke, but play someone, if we're supposed to be anywhere from 6 to 10 in the Big Ten, let's play someone 6 to 10 in the ACC and see where we're at and get something that'll add. The Gavitt Games up in the air. If we play this year, then we're done for the next 3 years. So they might even spread that out a little bit more. And I think someone in the chat room said that they've heard that we're not playing next year. So I think Gavitt Games are up in the air. But then the question becomes, Andy, do you want to play that fifth, big game for an opportunity, or I would probably rather play a couple of mid-majors, 100, 200 net type of teams home, and maybe even on the road, to build that number resume that we use as bracketologists if you're not going to fill the Gavitt Games with another brand name. Now, from a fan standpoint, you want brand names coming into Assembly Hall, but we should have Arkansas and the Big Ten ACC coming in a preseason. So that's my thoughts and wonders as we move forward on the schedule.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if you don't play in the Gavitt Games, because I feel like I've read different things about it's a minimum of 4 years, but I think they wanted to play at 5. I'm not really sure, but if you didn't play that road game and the Big Ten ACC game was at home, you could easily have a scenario where you don't have any road games in that scenario. I don't know if that's how it would shake out, but you'd have to go out and find a road game with Arkansas coming here and the other. So that'll be interesting to see. Ryan, any final thoughts on the schedule before we take a break?
Yeah, I mean, based on the selection committee's criteria this year, they should just play a bunch of 200 level teams and forget all these high level games and just play in the Big Ten. We don't know what's going to matter, what's not, but I think that we all saw this year that the number of wins is the most important thing to the committee. And so I just want them to be able to rack up some wins. Yeah, you don't want to play 300 level teams, of course not. But, if you're going to fill out the schedule, you've got some tough games and then you've got the Big Ten. I think you probably aren't going to be harassed if you fill it out with some lower tier teams. I agree with Coach, though. I'd love to see him play some MAC teams, some American teams, some lower level
Missouri Valley.
Missouri Valley, like teams in that tier of a conference. But you don't have to play the best team from that conference, but playing teams that aren't, one bid leagues, maybe necessarily, but teams that are sort of maybe leagues that are on the bubble of 1-2 bid. So I think that's the smart way to go.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Yeah, it is funny when you look at that, kind of that swing of the Gavitt Games, whether you play it or not. It's hard to look back at the selection process from last year and not say, man, I'd really rather play somebody else that I think I could beat, as opposed to taking a road game that maybe helps you down the line. Although you're going to have an early Big Ten road game in December against somebody. It's the value you place in being able to get that other road win or another road opportunity versus does it just matter that I will win games? And so, again, 1 year sample size using the net might push you in one direction. Well, I guess we'll see whether the coaching staff takes it that way or not, but that'll do it for that segment. And coming up next, we're going to answer your questions. We got a lot of good ones, so stick with us here on the Assembly Call. We'll be back after this. All right, 17-13.
My son, who's the manager at Indiana State, wants another return trip to Assembly Hall as his senior year. I'm not sure I want that. Although we owe
IU wants that, quite honestly.
But
as long as they don't hit 33 pointers, it should be fine.
Indiana used to play Ball State. Used to play Evansville. Used to play, and they're not automatic wins, but they make you better. And if you're not going to play that Gavitt game, that would be a game or two to add.
Yeah, one year they went to was on the road at Evansville.
They opened their new building and did that.
Yeah, and that was really just a cheap way for Crean to get a road win. I think test his team on the road too, but go through the motions of a road game. But yeah, I don't understand why more teams don't do that. Is just, play MAC teams, play Missouri Valley teams. I get it. I'm not saying you go play the best ones. You don't have to play Wichita State if you play in the American, but play.
I think you just get in situations with some of them where they're going to want even a 2-for-1, some kind of return game at some point that I think most schools aren't willing to give up, because
that's what you say. No,
they want the revenue.
What also is with those schools? Those schools are trying to rack up wins in the non-conference too.
Yeah, but the hard part for them, I think it was Gary Parrish that wrote something about this a year or two ago. I think it was last year, where the gist of it was, yeah, we know that you want to get a 2-for-1, but at a certain point, like, those teams are, the way the committee has worked, those teams are going to get left out if you didn't beat anybody in the non-conference. So as much as you want to say, screw you, I'm not going to go take your bye game and go only play at your place and not get anything back out of it, I do think there's an element of that, which is like, if somebody's giving you a chance, you damn sure better take it, because you might not get another one. And then when you get left out, you have that. So that's a really difficult spot for those teams. So I don't say that in a way that doesn't recognize the position they're in, but yeah, it's really difficult to
think about the coaches who renegotiate their contracts and stuff. They renegotiate on their winning percentage, right. So they don't want to go to Indiana and get fed to a top team. They want to win more games. And, because when they go to renegotiate their contract or move up to the next level, people scrutinize their winning percentage. They don't look at their individual, I guess if you're re-signing, they know the story, but if you're like putting up for a bigger job, they're going to look at how many games did you win, how many games did you lose, and okay, you got left out of the tournament because you're in this garbage conference, but that's they don't want to dive into those. I have to say, I've been impressed with the scheduling with Archie, so that they're willing to take some chances. I mean, going to Arkansas last year is a chance they took, and they almost won. He doesn't seem to be afraid of anybody, which is a positive. Yep. All right, let's get this done. How much time do we have?
We got about 12 minutes, so we've got a decent.
Keep your eye on the chat window there, Coach.
All right.
Decent thought. So yeah, I tried to order these questions in the order that I thought we'd probably go through them. So cool. We'll kind of hammer these out and then and see how many we get through and go from there. So I'll keep you posted in the chat of where we are, but we got 12 minutes and 11 seconds if my math is correct. And my math is also based on estimating how long I talked before I started the timer in the first second.
Great.
So a little bit of leeway. You never know. Well, then I started trying to do it. I probably should have just stopped and started over. So then I was trying to like fumble around on my phone while I was trying to talk, which probably didn't work very well either.
Oh, wow. I like Jen's question. That's a good go home question.
Well, the one about the fish in the fountain was a good one too. So we'll see what we got here.
Hey, Ryan, Madeline is a great follow on social media, by the way, dude.
Yeah, I'm the one who got her to get a Twitter account. So
she had some good comments about my son not liking my edict not to eat the Reese's bar at home.
I'll have to read it. I didn't see it.
She was quite funny.
I didn't see that part. I did see that you posted that, but given that it was a gift for teacher appreciation, I mean, seems only fair.
I mean, the kid took my third TV out of my man cave, and I can't have him taking my Reese's either. After I pay for his college.
That's disownment level stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, let's be real. All right, let's go. Let's get this done.
All right.
I got to go read that. So let's go.
Welcome back to the Assembly Call. I'm Andy Bottoms filling in for Jared Morris here with the coach, Brian Tonsoni and Ryan Phillips. Remember, you need to be subscribed to our email newsletter. We send out a weekly IU news roundup, even during the offseason. And after every game, we send out a detailed post-game analysis. Just text IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. That's IU to 66866 or go to assemblycall.com. It's time now for our mailbag. All questions were submitted via Twitter or our private IU basketball discussion community, which you can learn more about at assemblycall.com/community. And we'll dive right in. We got a lot of questions. We actually have a decent amount of time, so we'll try to burn through as many of these as we can. So the first one is from Brock. Which incoming player's skill set has you most excited for their impact in 2019-20? Ryan, I'll let you take that one first.
Trace Jackson Davis, 100%. I just think that he's a guy who can play inside out. He's getting better at shooting. He's not a shooter yet, but he's a guy who can dominate games, and he's a guy who maybe won't dominate games as a true freshman, but he has that potential certainly. And long term, I think this guy's going to be around for a couple of years. So long term, watching his growth is going to be a lot of fun. The guy I compared him to, watching him there, it's not a 1-for-1 comparison, but Jared asked for this, and I said the guy he reminds me of is DJ White as a high schooler. And we all know how good DJ White turned out to be. He was a Big Ten Player of the Year. That's the kind of guy I think Trace Jackson Davis is, and he's an Indiana kid, and he's a kid who can do so much with the basketball, and he also plays within a team setting. So I think that he's just a great fit for what Indiana needs. especially if you're going to have, some guys like Deron Davis struggling with their minutes maybe next year. He's a great guy who can come in, fit in, and really do a lot for you.
Coach, how about you?
Yeah, I'd have to second Trace Jackson Davis. I want to see where he can guard. Can he guard?
That's going to be really interesting.
Can he guard the four? Can he play the four? And can his shot stretch the floor enough for Archie's offense as a four? Right now it's 12 to 15 feet, right, Ryan? I think his shot.
It's like free throw line, man.
Yeah, and so, but you also all the incomers are going to be interesting. I think they're Indiana guys. They're fighters. They're tough nosed. I'd like to see how Joey Brunk's game plays in the Big Ten. That's going to be interesting as well behind TJD.
I'll go a slightly different direction. Obviously, hard not to be excited about Trace, but Armaan Franklin, if I think of this, like maybe I interpret this question too much around like skill set, but the two things I look forward to seeing from Armaan are competitiveness and shooting. And he shot the ball dramatically better as a senior. So I think that's a positive. Perhaps this is a little bit of wish casting on my part because this team needs a shooter so bad. And I'm just hoping that what he was able to do as a high school senior will translate well to the college level. But from a skill or an attribute standpoint, those are the things that everything you read about him and what this team needs. I think those kind of fill some holes of what we've seen from IU. So I'm really interested to see him. I think with if Quinones picks Memphis, there's certainly an opening for minutes at the guard spot, given what the roster looks like right now. And if he can really come in and be competitive and make shots early on, I think he's got a chance to seize at least a piece of the pie in the backcourt.
Yeah, we talked about this, and his attitude reminds me of Al Durham's. He's just a fighter. He's just a battler, and he's a guy who's not going to give up. Armaan Franklin is going to be a lot of fun as an IU player, and he's the kind of guy when he guards you, it's going to be like getting in a street fight. Like he is a hard, tough kid who can really do a lot on a basketball court. I love him, and I think he's going to be great at IU.
I'll go to another question from Brock here. He said, what other than improved perimeter shooting, obviously, would constitute improved offense for Archie and the Hoosiers in year 3? Fewer turnovers, better decision-making, more offensive rebounds. Coach, I'll go to you first on this one. Give me one thing you're looking at from an offensive standpoint that would point you in a good direction.
Transition offense. I think we saw Archie late in the season really try to get Finney to push the ball. When Archie was hired, I went back and looked at his Dayton teams, and they really pushed the ball. Went back to some of his clinics on coaching clinics and watched what he talked about and how he set up his transition. And I haven't seen a whole lot of that in year 1 and 2, and I have to think that is personnel driven. But you saw him waving his hand and really encouraging. I think that's a way for teams that don't have everything you need offensively to get some easy offense in transition. So I would say the improved shooting will help, but let's get the ball and go this next year and get some things out of transition offense.
100% agree. It's transition offense. I don't think, you'd love to have also a higher assist to turnover ratio because it means you're moving the ball and you're not giving it up. I think that's very important but there were times this year where the turnovers were low and the offense still struggled. And I think that, it's, if you're not shooting it well, if you're getting up and down the floor, you can cover for that a little bit because you're making the other team work really hard. And it's an easy way to get baskets if you push the ball, get fouled, get to the line, and make your free throws. I do, and that dovetails with what I was going to say was, and this counts as offense, is free throws. They have to shoot free throws better. There were several games this year they lost because of their lack of an ability to make free throws in key situations. And that kind of stuff is contagious. It seems like there's no way it should be, but it is. When guys are missing free throws, they lose confidence in their teammates and they lose confidence in themselves at the line. It's contagious. Transition offense and free throws are the two things that need to change for IU.
Yeah, I'd throw turnovers in there
along with 3-point shooting, of course.
I think we've certainly seen pretty big improvement from a turnover percentage standpoint. Jumping from rankings, in a couple years from being 322nd to 133rd. But I do think for a team that is likely to be, and it goes along a little bit with what you guys said with transition, in a team that is likely to still be somewhat limited from a shooting perspective, every possession becomes a little bit more important because you're just not that adept at making shots. And that's why, as you guys said, transition offense becomes important because you're able to get some things, get the defense scrambling and trying to recover in those situations. I think all of that really ties together, taking care of the ball, finding the open man, having guys knock down shots. That brings the assist rate up that you talked about, and being able to, kind of play fast, read things, and take advantage of that. And I'm somewhat curious to think about, had Finney not suffered the concussion in the middle of the year, and some of those things, if the trajectory the team was on would have landed them maybe in the top 100 in turnover percentage. But I do think there were, sections of the season where that still continued to be a problem area for them. Let's go to Ben's question. If you guys could go back and relive one moment in IU basketball history that you wanted to be a part of but couldn't in person, what would it be? Coach, what stood out to you on this one?
I think I'm going to have to say the Watt shot. I was coaching and watching it on an internet game breakdown, so I just know the shot went in. I didn't even see it on television in the locker room. That's probably it. As the oldest member of the crew here, I'd like to have gone back and been at the 1976 championship, undefeated, beating Michigan in Philadelphia. I would have loved to have been there live.
Yep. Ryan?
Watch out for me, for sure. I know yours is going to be the Killingsworth dunk, of course, but the watch shot is.
If only I could have lived that in your shoes.
I know, right?
It would have been amazing.
Did you know I worked for the IDS?
Wow. Yeah. We have to tell us that story sometime. I look forward to hearing it.
No, it's the watch out for me, for sure. That's a perfect moment, for an IU fan, because it had been any other team would be one thing, but beating Kentucky with that team and that in that situation and all that, it was perfect.
Yeah, that's probably what I would pick. Honorable mention, Bill Murphy, I think, replied to the tweet and said he wanted to be at the 1940 championship because that was the only one he didn't see in person.
Way to brag, Bill.
Yeah. I would say the watch shot, partly because what I was doing at the time of that was working in like a terrible work scenario where I was and didn't get to. I was listening to Fish, so at least I heard it that way. The other one I think would be '87, being in New Orleans, being able to go out to Bourbon Street, celebrate the championship. I think that would be a pretty cool one as well. Obviously, honorable mention to the Killingsworth dunk there, Ryan. Of course.
Thank you. Runner up for me would be '87, of course.
Yeah. Well, we might as well hit this question from Phil. Who stole the fish out of Showalter Fountain in 1987? Coach has been on record as having kissed a random woman at that point. So, I mean, he seems to be a potential suspect for stealing something like this. But, Coach, you got any leads for anybody on what might have happened to the fish?
You do know that the camera is tight here in the man cave because I don't want everything that is potentially in the man cave to be out for public consumption. And I was in the fountain in 1987. And other than that, I plead the fifth and I don't understand anymore.
Nice. All right. I'm going to circle back to this question from Rick. He said, do you think IU is a bit undersold for next year? Because if, and maybe a big if, Jerome and Race are healthy, it's almost like two more new recruits. Ryan, what are your thoughts on that? Is it potential that IU is underrated, and that is one of the reasons coming into the season next year?
Of course. I mean, I've said it since the beginning that I thought next year's team was going to be better than this year's team. But if you step back and look at it, you lose your top two players and you think there's no way they're going to be better. But I actually think they will be if everybody's healthy and everything works out the way it's supposed to. You lose, Romeo Langford and Juwan Morgan, and you look at that and you think, oh God, they're going to take a step back. And I think that's nationally what people are saying. But those people don't, when they make these lists about how good teams are going to be and all that, they're not seeing daily what we see with this team and what we're hearing about these guys. And Race Thompson is going to be a real big part of this team, and he barely played this year. Rob Finney is going to take over as the point guard full time, and he was out for a long stretch this year. There's lots of stuff in there that's positive about this team moving forward. Deron Davis hopefully will be healthier, in better shape, all that. So yeah, I think that is definitely part of it. Is that nationally, they don't know about the guys that we know about and that we are expecting to make big gains next year and in the offseason.
Coach, what about you?
And, Juwan Morgan averaged 7.7 points a game as a sophomore, and Indiana lost 3 players to the pros, and he averages 16.5 the next year. So there are jumps like that happen. that people nationally don't know. And then also look at teams in the tournament this year. There were several teams, Purdue, Texas Tech, who graduated 4 starters and was able to put pieces back together. I'm not saying that's going to happen to Indiana, but sometimes surprises happen, or sometimes growth happens that is not predictable by paper.
I think I'm trying not to, as I've probably done so many times in the last couple of off seasons, like talk myself into this team being better than it would appear to be. So I might be on the more pessimistic side of that, but I think it's a reason. It's at least another question and an unknown that's there that might make things a little bit different than what most people would believe. So I think in that regard, it's a fair question. I'm just trying not to fall into the same trap as we have in the last couple off seasons. But that'll do it for this week of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you again next Thursday night. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. All right. That will do it. Got through a lot of the questions there. So excellent.
Next week.
Yeah, there's a couple left, but that was pretty good. This is a good time to be able to hit a lot of those when there's things going on.
For people wondering about Jerome, we don't know. I know people are talking about it in the chat. We don't know. Nobody seems to really know. And he'll get cleared when he gets cleared, if he gets cleared. So, I mean, that's really all we can say at this point. I think we've all heard whispers. I know Jared has, one way or the other, what's coming, but we don't know for sure. Nobody knows for sure. So I think by midsummer we should have a resolution to the situation. He'll either be cleared and back at Indiana or not. So we all want him to be cleared. I think he's a phenomenal basketball player. He was one of the recruits I was the most excited about, even with Romeo in the class, because you knew he was going to be around. But yeah, so we'll see. I honestly don't think, from what I've read and heard, I don't think Indiana knows yet. And certainly if they did know, they wouldn't be letting us know. They're going to make a decision, they were like, but I don't think they know. I don't think the doctors know yet. And I don't think Jerome knows, but as it is right now, he's working out and stuff. So we'll see, but he's still on a non-contact order, I believe. And he's not a full go. So
I think I guess the only thing I would say, I certainly don't have any inside information whatsoever, but I do think, just looking at the way they handled the concussion stuff with Ray Thompson, that I feel, while I don't feel confident or feel one way or the other at all about him being able to come back, I do feel confident that they're keeping his best interest in mind, and
for sure they are
following all the appropriate steps and not trying to put him in any position where it's going to be detrimental to him long term. So that can, in a lot of cases like race, turn out to be a lengthier process than maybe people would like it to be. But if there's anything I'm confident in the situation, that's that they seem to be handling it as best they can, given the circumstances. And you certainly hope, for the sake of the kid, let alone, IU fans, that he's able to continue on and play. And we'll find out when everybody else finds out and go from there.
Yeah, I think that's just the perfect way to put it. We'll all find out soon enough. But yeah, we don't know. We probably won't know until IU releases it. I don't think anybody's going to know until IU makes a determination one way or the other. So,
and even then, they might wait till practice comes around too. Just, if there's any chance,
unless he decides he wants to go back home or something like that,
right? And leaves.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back next week. Hopefully, some more. Maybe something more eventful happens next week that we can talk to. Not bad eventful, but ideally good eventful would be what we would aim for.
Please specify.
We've had a few off seasons that have been eventful, but not in a good way. So
I remember last year
I'd rather be scrounging for things than talking about some of the stuff that we've had to talk about at other points.
Yeah, I remember last year we were just like being slow. Last year, the whole off season, we're just like, God, it is painfully quiet. We kind of like it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got its positives and negatives when you shake it out that way. So we'll see. But yeah, I do think, going back to the transfer thing, I would guess they'll find a grad transfer somewhere to do something. But I think actual, like, recruit wise, there's not a whole lot.
There isn't much.
Not a whole lot left that's going to do much.
Unless they swing big on one of the guys left or something. If they have a visit left or something. I mean, Trendon Wofford, I'm really surprised he hasn't taken a visit. Like he has not taken a visit. And that's really, really surprising to me because his brother is really pushing. So I don't know.
Who knows?
Pushing where? Is he pushing to come to IU?
Oh, Watford Christian is pushing him hard to go to IU. Yeah. Really? At least on social media. Yeah. But I mean, I've heard behind the scenes too, he wants him to. But
I always thought he just wanted to go make his name at his own place, not necessarily where.
Yeah. I think
I could understand that.
Totally. And, especially when your brother made one of the greatest shots in the school's history and all that stuff. But I think that also Christians just tell him, hey, go visit. Like you might not, he's been on campus before. It's not like he needs to visit. He's seen everything repeatedly over the years. But it would. I think it's just surprising that he hasn't given a visit.
Yeah, it's because he's down to what he's talked about LSU. I think that feels like a challenging situation to walk into for all the reasons that need that need no explanation. Memphis, just with all the guys that are there, seems odd. That seemed like where he was leaning before. So it's kind of like if you didn't commit there already, that seems weird. Alabama, I know, is on the radar. They had a coaching change, although I think Nate Oates is a really good coach. So you almost wonder if he didn't take some time and do that. I mean, I think he talked Kira Lewis into staying, and some of those guys that maybe were going to leave, he was able to get back. So that might be an interesting one to kind of, if you're kind of thinking to go make your name for yourself at your own place. But yeah, it'll be it seems kind of interesting. Yeah, some of these guys, it just drags out so long. It's like, I don't know what at some point make a decision, because you kind of know in a lot of cases what rosters look like, but maybe they're saying, hey, I'm going to wait, see who keeps their name in the NBA draft and figure stuff out from there, I guess. But
that's really the only shoe left to fall for some of these schools is
the date for that's late. It has gotten later. So
yeah,
who knows? Oh, well. All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back next week, and we'll talk to you guys then.
Later.